JJ Reddick wants to play Anthony Davis more at the power forward position this year, which is something that Laker fans worldwide have been clamoring for since the 2020 season. We're going to talk about whether or not that's the right decision, how he can make it happen, and we're also going to finish this video talking about other center candidates to help pair with Anthony Davis for not just now, but the immediate future as well. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. Welcome to the Basketball Bulletin, where we cover a ton of basketball-related content, not just on the Lakers for today, but on all of the teams league-wide. So make sure you subscribe. We're trying to hit 6,000 subscribers in the next couple of weeks, and we definitely need your help to do it. All right, at any point, feel free to join in down below. What do you guys think about it? So that being said, a few days ago, JJ Reddick said this about Anthony Davis and the way that the team is trying to use him. It's definitely something we could use in our rotation, Reddick said. What I really like is having AD at the 4 and him being able to be in the switching group while still having some size at the 5 with Jackson. That's part of it I like a lot. So the interesting thing about this is, like I said, Lakers fans have been wanting this for a long time. And so that's really interesting because you can see different parts of the Laker fan base where it's like Anthony Davis is a 4. It doesn't matter what you say. He wants to play the 4. He is not a 5. He is misused. He's all these other things. And it's interesting to see the way that he has been handled throughout his career. Pretty much, if you look at the positions that he's played primarily, it's been an even split pretty much between years he played center, even all the way back in New Orleans, and then his last few years where he's playing almost exclusively center with the Lakers. And so I want to ask you guys, what do you think Anthony Davis's true position is? Here's the benefit to having Anthony Davis. It doesn't really matter. He can play either position effectively. Now, why Lakers fans really want, and I think this is also what JJ is talking about too, why they want him to have a center alongside him is because it opens up AD's defensive potential. For the last couple of years with Darvin, AD was more or less stuck with being a rim protector / shot deterrent at the rim. And that, in my opinion, is a great role for him, but you're underutilizing him. He is somebody that's able to switch on the perimeter. He's able to keep up with quicker guards in the perimeter. He's able to use those extendo man arms to get contests on the perimeter, block some three-point shots. Really rare thing to see. He's somebody that's able to, and this is, in my opinion, his best role, come in from the weak side as a helper and shut shots down and be a roamer on defense and fix the mistakes around the court. That is where he is at his best. So if you got him locked in, and for example, if you're versus Denver, for example, and he's got a body up with Jokic, all of a sudden that player becomes LeBron or Rui, and they don't really have a lot of optionality in terms of that. And that word is the most important word, because having the option is the big thing here, because I don't personally think you have to start him at the center. I don't think the Lakers will, unless they get some super top tier center or something, or very promising prospect like a Walker Kessler or something. He may even come off the bench, to be honest with you. I don't know if they would change the way their starting lineup works to accommodate this, but if you find ways in spurts for like 10 minutes in a game to make it happen, then you can have this look, right? And again, you have the option to do it in certain matchups, because if we're keeping it 100%, there are not a lot of matchups where Anthony Davis is not a big enough player to body up with the other guys. There's only a handful of centers that really can get his number. And part of the reason why that is because AD is a big dude. He's about 6'10", 6'11", 250 or so pounds, but he's got a higher center of gravity. So these guys that are able to, this is why Sabonis and Jokic give him a lot of trouble. They're able to push on his hips, and he doesn't have the strength down there because these guys get into him, right? And so while he is pretty much near the same size as them, it doesn't work against these guys, and he'd be better coming on the outside. And that's why the Lakers try to put LeBron or Rui on Jokic and have AD come in. You know, remember that thing where they were talking about how they solved that matchup a couple of years ago in the Western Conference Finals? It looked good for spurts, but Jokic is just so transcendently great that he figured it out instantly. But if you have the option to throw somebody like a Walker Kessler or Jonas Valanciunas, while they can't guard him one-on-one, it would look good from coming from the opposite side. You know what you would have with that? You'd have a very, very, very juiced up version of what in my opinion anyway, you could maybe make the argument otherwise, in what the Timberwolves had last year with that matchup. And they had the ability to put Cat, who I thought bodied up pretty well. Again, Jokic is going to get his. They had the ability to put Cat onto Jokic, and that looked better than having Gobert on Jokic, because similar situation with AD. He's just going to push him under the basket, basically, because higher center of gravity. And the four-time DPOY, right, did not look good. He was absolutely barbecue. But if you have him coming from the opposite side as a rim protector, weak side helper, then all of a sudden Gobert is better utilized. The trick is, though, with that, is that AD is actually useful on the other side of the court. That's not really a shot at Gobert. It's just a reality, right? And so that's, like I said, you can maybe argue otherwise because he's got all those accolades. AD doesn't. But I think AD is a little bit more useful because he can also give it back. And obviously, if you're able to keep up with the scoring, maybe stop him a couple of times from scoring on you as well in the process, then the game should be closer, right? And so I think you have an interesting situation where if they get a couple centers to pair alongside him, that could work. Now, I wanted to show you some interesting stuff because I've been kind of looking at this screen here. Hopefully there have been some clips or something because I've just been staring at the screen as I went off on my tangent, because this is something I've talked about a lot and I've got a lot of thoughts on it that I'm not going to get all out in this video. If you haven't already, now's the perfect time. Subscribe. If you made it this far, you're definitely enjoying the video. Hit that thumbs up. What do you think about some of the things I said? What do you think about this next point? All right. So we've been looking at Anthony Davis's stats and stuff. Hopefully you got a good look at them. Here's a look at Anthony Davis's usage over the last couple of years. I mentioned this earlier. He played basically 60-40 in his rookie year in New Orleans, power forward. For the first couple of years, first few years here, that's pretty much the split. 60-40, 70-30 has pretty much been the split there. In his fourth season, the 2015-16, it was nearly identical, but just a little bit more at center. And then the following season, he shifts more into center at 64% of the time as a center. And then this reaches ahead in 2018-19, the season just before coming, where he played pretty much exclusively center. And the thing about this is that if we were to look at the okay, I'm not going to be able to pull up the roster without really digging for it. If we were to pull up the roster, I'm pretty sure that that's probably out of some sort of necessity, right? Because they probably didn't have enough centers on the team, or maybe they just wanted to try a different look, right? That's possible. And when he came to the Lakers, he was at a 60-40 split, which is more in line with his career for that 2019 season. Ironically, the 2019-20 season is the one that they won the NBA championship in the bubble. That season, he didn't even play his most at center. The following season, he played the most at center with a 90-10 split. But nobody really seems to remember that season because everyone wants to talk about the championship and nobody wants to talk about the following season. But the following season is what you're really looking for, in my opinion, in terms of like what they should have done, or if you're looking for them to say, hey, put him at the center more, or at the power forward instead of the center more. If you're somebody that's like diehard, 21 is the season you should look at. And here's a look at how things were in the playoffs. And this is what I mean with optionality. He actually shifted to playing primarily the center in the bubble playoffs. And that is my point about optionality. It's not so much about where he starts. It's not so much about what position he plays. It doesn't really matter. He can do both, like I opened the video saying. It's about having the option to rotate him in and out of the spot. The unsung hero from that playoff run was two things. Firstly, Anthony Davis's versatility, being able to play either position. And remember they called it small ball? I'm not sure how it's small ball if you've got Anthony Davis at center. I don't know. But that's people that are saying, you know, he should be a power forward, but it's not small. He's still huge, right? So that's the thing. You got LeBron at power forward. That's a big team, right? And so remember that, right? So that was part of the things, is Anthony Davis's versatility. And secondly, Markieff. Kuzma too, but Markieff. Markieff, they picked up that season at the deadline, and Markieff was huge for this team because all of a sudden you can go small and you could have another bigger, girthier guy out there that's spacing the floor. And so what they wound up doing in the playoffs that year, if you're looking at that season specifically where they won the championship, which I understand because they won as a blueprint, they wound up having the optionality to switch him in and out of that position. And so in the playoffs, there were entire series where one of JaVale or Dwight was literally out of the rotation. They did not play them at all, right? That doesn't mean that they weren't good. They weren't useful because, you know, Dwight, I don't think played against Houston in the second round is what it was, but he was extremely useful against the Nuggets. I don't think JaVale played against the Nuggets. And then in the finals, I think JaVale and Dwight both got a little bit of a burn, but they won the championship, bouncing one of those dudes out and putting Caruso into the starting lineup in that final game. Like that, it's the optionality. That's the point that you're really looking for with this. And so I think that's what we really need to be focusing on. Now, the following season was a weird one. He played 90%, like I said, at the center or power forward that season, 10% at center. It's 91-10 somehow, but whatever, right? The thing about that season was that they had a lot of guys. They had Marc Gasol. They had Montrezl Harrell. They had they brought in Drummond midway through the year. They had a lot of dudes that were playing center. Also, Anthony Davis, I believe, missed literally 50% of the games that year because I think that was a 72-game season. He played 36 games that year. And so that was just kind of a weird situation for him that year. And in the playoffs, that was the year where he got hurt in the first round, and they only, I think, got bounced after the first round. Yeah, 5 games that year. And it just wasn't, they weren't able to really do anything. So LeBron was coming back off that injury, wasn't himself, wasn't as explosive. He'd have a couple moments, but wasn't himself. Not like he was in 22. And so that season was kind of a weird one overall, but I did like that season. Honestly, if I'm being honest with you, I liked the roster construction the following season a little bit more. You add in a spacing center, you add in a nice energy hustle guy off the bench in Montrez, you add in a rebounder that could also help you. He gives you a similar look to like Dwight, where you've got a girthier, bulkier guy back there that you can have Anthony Davis play the power forward and help off of. I really like that look a lot. The following year, if I'm being honest with you, I think that they actually retooled amazingly, which was the complete and utter talking point of that season. I don't know why that season is so forgotten, and just, well, I know why. It's because they didn't win. It was a bad season. They crashed and burned because of injuries. But people don't remember that team that season the way that it was in the moment. Everyone was giving them kudos. They were saying they did the right thing for changing that team around. But it just, again, didn't really go anywhere because their guys got hurt, and it was what it was. That was the Solomon Hill injury year. It was just a bad year overall. So that's kind of what it looked like. But then the next couple seasons are the Russ years, and Anthony Davis primarily played center in both of those years. Ironically, LeBron primarily played center in one of these years too. And so you've probably seen the graphic of LeBron being the only player that's actually played primary of his minutes at each of the 5 positions. He had one season in 2020 where he primarily was listed at power forward, or point guard. And then he was also, I believe, listed at point guard primarily in 21, the year that Anthony Davis got 91 and 10 that we've talked about. So little side tangent there, but it's pretty fun to see that. And that's because, again, when they submit the player sheets, that's the position the player is listed at. It's not so much about it. Well, it happens throughout the game too. It's adjusted throughout the game, but it's more about that. But anyways, moving on. So the next couple years with the Russ years, kind of just whatever, but he primarily played center there, and it's really hit ahead in the last couple of years where he's at 97 and 100% the last couple of years. They are not, Darvin did not, the last year with Darvin, he played 100% of his minutes at center. And the last 2 years with Darvin said, you're not playing power forward anymore. He played 197 last season. He said, you're not playing power forward, which is interesting. So let's shuffle out of here. I spent a lot of time, like I said, I have a lot to say about that. Let's shuffle out of here and look at the current roster for the Lakers and how they can make Anthony Davis's dream come true, which, by the way, I'm all for keeping your guy happy. I just don't really care if he says he wants to play power forward. I don't. Just for the record, that never mattered to me. Anthony Davis says it just doesn't matter to me. Because, like, if LeBron said, okay, well, he's LeBron, so maybe it's a little bit of a different pedigree, but if LeBron said he wants to start at center, I'm like, okay, whatever. So what am I supposed to do with that information? That's just the way I feel about it. Like, I understand keeping your guy happy. You want to put centers around him, but the dude's 6'10", 250. I mean, that's center size in today's NBA. It is what it is. Anyway, moving on. So looking at their current roster, they don't got a lot of options. The funny thing is, Anthony Davis, LeBron, and Colin Castleton on a 2-way are the 3 biggest guys on this team, weight-wise, 250 on each of them. So LeBron, he's slimmed down a bit. Maybe he's up above that. I'm not really sure. But either way, they're all 250 right now. 6'9", 6'10 on these guys. That's the biggest players on the entire roster, right? So what you're going to have to do if you want to have Anthony Davis play at, technically Hayes is the tallest guy, and some Kyler Kelly. If you want to have Anthony Davis play the power forward, you have to basically pair him with Jackson Hayes and a 2-way guy. That's where things are kind of weird for the Lakers, is they don't have the option to really do that right now. Maybe when Christian Wood comes back, you'd put him at the center. But the tricky thing with that, and kind of with Hayes, is that Anthony Davis is still technically bigger than these guys. I mean, not as tall, but bigger than Hayes, bigger and taller than Wood. Like, it's kind of weird. The promising thing from last year is that the Wood, LeBron, and Davis lineups early in the year were actually kicking butt. They were going insanely well, but Darvin just for some reason stopped using it. Whatever. And so that's more or less where they're at. And then otherwise, they have some other 2-way guys like Koloko, Castleton. These guys I don't really expect to get big minutes. And so you've got to pretty much pair Anthony Davis with Jackson Hayes or Wood. I actually think Wood would go pretty well. But like I said, he's still pretty much the center in that situation. So I guess if you're the Lakers, you're really hoping for either a trade or for Koloko or Castleton, probably Koloko at this point, to really show you something. But even if Koloko or Castleton shows you something, they're still restricted by being on a 2-way contract, playing 50 or so games in a year. And that would mean that you would have to clear a roster spot to sign them to the team at some point. And I don't really, or Traore as well. I don't know what you really are doing there. Are you waiving somebody like Reddish midway through the season? His money would stay on your books. You don't really want to waive somebody if you can avoid it. I don't know their salary cap situation that could push them into being a higher apron. I'm not really sure. And all of that stuff does matter when you talk about this. And so let's talk a little bit about trade targets that the Lakers could potentially have. First things first, I got to just say that this is where things are a little bit weird because multiple things are happening here. Firstly, there's not really a team in the league that's actively looking to ship out a center, especially as the league starts to transition back to having that size over the last few years. There's not really a team that's like, oh, we don't want size. We don't want size. Like, we just take it. Especially if it's a serviceable big man. They're not really trying to do that. Secondly, there's the classic equation of how valuable is this guy to you versus how valuable is this guy to us? Like, okay, so Walker Kessler in this case, right? I pulled him up. His nickname is Skywalker. That's a great one. I pulled him up. So it's like, we don't really like, so if you're the Jazz, we are clearly shopping him. I don't know why they're shopping him. They drafted Filipowski too, I believe. It's unfortunate. I think that they should be investing a little bit more into him. I like him, but regardless, we're clearly shopping him at this point. And let's just say they probably value him at like 1 pick. Let's just throw that out there as a number. But for other teams, they're going to say, we want 2 picks. And that's the situation with the Lakers. That's their asking price for Kessler, is because they're selling high on the asset. And that's what you want to do in the market, right? Regardless of what they internally think of him, how much is he worth to you is the question. And so that's what they're trying to get people to bite on. And with these trades, or with any trade in particular, you're just going to have to wait until the cost goes down, because as you get closer to December, January, and especially into February, the costs will start to trickle down and these guys will start hitting the market in a serious way. But right now, summer preseason, oh, no. We want full price. We're not considering anything. It's the same as if you were to list something online that doesn't sell and you're going to, let it sit there for a while and then you'll come back. Okay, I'll lower the price a little bit. So that's the same situation they're in with all these guys. But on the topic of Walker, he's a weird one to trade for because the asking price is 2 firsts. So if you're the Lakers, I feel like 1 first and then removing the protections from their previous trades pick would be a really good thing. I don't know why they wouldn't do that. But clearly that's not enough for them, because I am sure the Lakers probably already proposed that, because if they haven't, I just think that's malpractice. So clearly that's not enough at this point. Maybe in the future it is. We'll see what happens. But they're asking for 2 firsts, and then he's also got that contract situation going on where he's still on a rookie scale deal. So you've got to find a way to match a low-tiered salary before his extension. And then on top of that, you're going to be put in a situation where you need to extend the dude. So he's going to be looking to get paid. So he's going to balloon after this season or next season. So he's a weird contract to look for and to try to get. Another player I'd look at personally is Richaun Holmes. I think that he could be a player that could fit really well on the Lakers team. He's getting a little bit older, so we'll see he's an interesting guy because he's had some good spurts, but he's always been a 2nd or 3rd string center for most of the teams he's played on. He's currently in NBA purgatory right now. Just joking, on the Wizards, and we're going to talk about another player that they have there. He could be a fun one to trade for. He's got a mid-tier. It looks like, I don't know if this is exactly true, but it looks like he took the mid-level exception this year and got 12, 13 million or so. So you could, without looking at the actual numbers, you could probably just flip Gabe and get this guy back, and that pretty much be it. Maybe you throw in a 2nd round pick or something like that. The next year is the last year on his deal in 25-26. He also has most of that deal non-guaranteed, so you could cut bait with this guy pretty easily if you wanted to as well. $250,000 guaranteed next year. I think that he would pair nicely as a better version of Jackson Hayes, which, by the way, I kind of like Jackson. I think he's a nice ball mover. He's got some quick feet as well if you let him switch out of them onto the perimeter, which Darvin never really let him do either. He's athletic, obviously, rim runner. He's got some happy feet in a bad way, and that he's gonna sometimes hack guys, or happy hands, excuse me, and that's his worst trait, I guess. But you could probably have a better, more bulkier version of a player of a similar archetype in Richaun Holmes. I like him a lot. Speaking of bulkier, we're actually going to shift over and look at Jonas Valanciunas, who is someone that the Lakers should have been all in on this offseason. It's kind of a weird situation to be in if you're the Lakers looking for Jonas, because you literally played him off the court versus the Pelicans last year. And so you know his deficiencies. Looking to try to get this guy kind of reminds me of, and this is obviously a much lower scale, kind of reminds me of how they played Russ the way that they did in the 2020 playoffs. And then we're like a year and a half later, oh no, we need him. So it is what it is, but interesting situation they have here. Basically $10 million player. So Jonas is somebody that I think that if the Lakers got him, could give them 20 solid minutes a game. Seriously. I don't think he's great at anything in particular. He's getting a little bit older, but he'd be a nice big body, which is all this team really needs right now. And that's kind of one of their main things. They just need a consistent big body center to be a part of their rotation. The team lacks a bruiser. And I think that for that salary number, I think that's a good number. Also, the third year of this deal is literally non-guaranteed entirely. So you could cut bait with him after a couple of seasons if you needed to do that. And obviously, as the cap goes up, the percentage of the contract goes down. So he becomes a better deal and value later on anyway. So if you wanted to keep him and put him as part of a package to maybe upgrade this position later in the future, who knows? I also think he is a player. When you start looking at these 2-year or so deals, you're starting to hit players that actually are really good on the LeBron timeline, because we don't know exactly how long that timeline is at this point. It's probably going to be about 2 years. And so you at that point are going to be at a bit of a crossroads with whether or not you are going to rebuild the team around Anthony Davis, rebuild in general. Like, what is your direction at that point? Which is why I think they're trying so hard to start shifting towards a rebuild right now. And so I think that if you start looking at these 2-year guys like him, and I think Holmes was as well, you're going to be putting yourself in a similar position where you already have to be making decisions anyway. And so that brings me back to a better center that's on a 2-year deal that's got more money guaranteed. So you got to look at him a little bit more interestingly, and that is Clint Capella. And so he's an interesting player that I think is starting to show his age a little bit, but I still think he's a player that can fit the needs that the Lakers have and would be a very good serviceable option for this team if they opted to try to sign him trade for him onto the team. It's just, I think that, and this is the last one I'm really going to throw out there, I think that if you were to look at it, there's a lot of serviceable low tier contract players I think you could plug into this team that are hidden gems on teams. One I was looking at was like Nick Richards. Like, I think you could do something like a lot of different players, and that would work out really well for this team in terms of just getting another guy in there. And again, maybe that's Koloko. Maybe that's Castleton. More people are higher on Koloko. I actually like Castleton a lot. Maybe it's one of those guys and they figure something else out mid-year. Maybe you've got a surprise, a gem in one of those guys, and it works out for you. But even if you get one of those guys, they're still not the bruiser type, not the bigger type, that's going to help out AD in some of those matchups. But I think that, the tricky thing about that is, I think that if you just have two bigs out there in those matchups, even if it's not a huge bruiser guy, it could actually be really good for them just in general to just play bigger. And the interesting thing about playing bigger is that pushing LeBron to the small forward is an interesting thing, because I remember seeing Cran do some basketball, somebody that watches all Laker games, logs all this stuff, and categorizes it offensively and defensively. I remember seeing him talk about how actually it's a misconception that playing the power forward is better for LeBron defensively. Apparently the power forward is a worse position to play. You have to match up with better players there. You got to be in more isolations there. And so actually pushing him to small forward serves multiple uses. And so having another big in there works out pretty well, instead of just having Rui and having Rui take that bigger matchup, which has been the case so far in preseason for this team. But this is a long video. We went on for quite a while. I have a ton of fun talking about this type of stuff. Like I said, I had a lot to say, a lot of which I really just didn't say, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys stuck through it all. If you did, make sure you hit that thumbs up. And if you want to see another interesting Laker related video, you should click that one on the screen right now.